is Tyler Suhu, and I guess this is my story because in life I'm reaching the end of my rope, and I don't even know if I'm going to make it through the winter, so I really thought that this was the perfect time to, if I was ever going to get my story out at all on the internet, mainly because I'm tired of re-explaining it in person over and over again, that now is the best time to get my story out. So I wrote all this down, so if I'm looking down to the left, it's because I'm reading what I wrote down so that I don't get so quite emotional thinking about what happened instead of saying it. So I'm going to be as objective as I possibly can, even though that's really hard to do because it doesn't feel great being the object of an abusive situation. So I guess the best way to start this off would be to give some background information. So my story begins like this. I was born in a family who I don't even know how I'm related to them, but apparently they're my biological or whatever. I don't see it because I'm nothing like my dad, and I'm the complete opposite of my mom, which is saying something, you know. She would always see the hateful parts in people, and I would always see, like, oh, you know, he made a mistake or something, or, you know, I try to be as positive as possible, and she was, like, possibly the most negative person I've ever met. And, the way that worked out was, as a kid, I didn't have many privileges. I wasn't really allowed, like, outside or anything. While other kids would play in, like, the neighborhood, have fun with each other, go to, like, you know, parties, have fun. I was that kid who had to stay in the house and never question why I was, like, never allowed out. I was a pretty mild-mannered kid. It's not like I had any behavioral issues or anything, but they treated me like I was just like a dog or something, and I wasn't allowed to be around other people's kids. And anytime I put up any sort of resistance, they would yell at me or cuss at me, and primarily they would beat me, like, a lot. Like, I would show you the markings, but that's not appropriate for YouTube. So, again, considering I was like the second to last out of 6 or 7 children in that immediate family, I didn't understand why I was always, like, the massive, like, scapegoat or point to where a fist should go if something happens. It was really hard to deal with, but I sucked it up because I thought tomorrow would always be a better day, but the opposite was true. I remember from ages 5 through 10, I remember crying myself to sleep a lot. I just sucked it up because I always thought tomorrow was going to be a better day, and I was just that docile to think that things would just turn out for the better. I never really got my proverbial day in the sun. It got to the point where when I was in 5th grade, most of the hair on top of my head was, like, either gray or white, and I was made fun of a lot for that. Like, there's old man Tyler just pissing his pants again or something. And, like, to be bullied both at school and home was, like, it was like a vicious cycle of two evils, and it was really hard to be supportive because my parents would tell my teachers, like, never to, like, comfort me or come to my aid or anything, because he needs to learn how to be an adult. And that was too much. The only reason I know that is because I lived with one of my elementary teachers recently, and she told me this story about how my parents would actually be really, really mad if I was, like, crying or I got hurt or anything when I was, like, 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever. That if I was ever hurt or crying or anything, or I was in a lot of pain, they're not to come to my aid whatsoever. I'm not even allowed to tell on anybody, or I wasn't even allowed to be believed. Just because I was me. And I needed to learn how to be an adult and learn how to be hateful or whatever like they were. And these are my parents telling my teachers to not be helpful. Thankfully, most of them didn't listen. Little did I know, one of my favorite teachers was actually one of the people that listened to my parents. So when I learned about that, I really found out the amount of how docile I really was. And it just put it all in perspective for me. It just was like, growing up isn't like what they want it to be. Growing up is like learning to understand what's really going on around you. And I grew up way too fast, and I never really could enjoy being a kid because it was like, you know, when you know too much about something, it's not as great. It's like when you eat too much chocolate and you feel happy, but then you realize that, like, the stuff in the chocolate will, you know, affect your weight or whatever. It's kind of like that situation, and what this was a whole lot of chocolate, I guess. And going back to the 5th grade thing, I kind of got sidetracked. I started hallucinating in 5th grade. I was seeing, like, nightmarish, like, images of just things hitting me. Primarily was hallucinations of my parents. But at this point, you know, everyone in my family that was older than me would take a swing at me with something or with their own body. I was basically being beaten down by my entire, like, family. The only person I know for a fact that didn't hit me, like, that wasn't playfully, that wasn't playful, no. The only person that didn't hit me and mean to hurt me was my little brother Joseph, but some things have arisen, so he's no longer I'm no longer considering him my little brother. He's letting too much happen. He's letting my parents manipulate him to the point where he doesn't want to speak to me. I thought he was really better than that, so that's primarily the reason I'm making this video. Yeah, but those hallucinations, they felt so real that I was freaking out so hard in the middle of classes that Child Protective Services was called. Now, this was like in the 5th grade, so when Child Protective Services came and started talking to my parents and stuff and the faculty and all that, my parents weren't too happy about it, and they started blowing things out of proportion, like, they're going to take you away, put you in foster care, and they're going to be a lot worse to you than we are. That's like an exact quote of what my mom told me. And because I was such a pushover still, I believed her, and in less than a week I dropped all charges, and I really shouldn't have, because what they did to all of us makes us the pathetic people that we are now. And this was brought up as a theory that certain people should just, like, never reproduce if they can't even handle raising one kid up right. They should never even have, like, 6 or 7 and just beat them all and treat them like shit. But that was, like, the only time in my life when CPS was watching them. That was the only time in my life, really, when my parents didn't hit me, or anybody, really. They were just doing it to save their own necks, but I never got an apology. And still, I dropped the charges. It was disappointing to me, because I look back at that now, and I know I could never be the brave hero that I thought I was. In fact, my lineage isn't really heroic at all, in a sense. I'm not talking about, like, an RPG nerd or anything. I'm talking about, like, just not, like, much nobility or, like, manners in the gene pool, so to speak. I actually come from a long line, both sides. A long line of just, like, liars and cheaters and thieves, really. It's amazing how I would be chastised for lying, cheating, and thievery as much, even though my immediate family would do it all the time. And I don't know my, like, grandparents or, like, my parents' brothers and sisters so much. But from just the gossip that goes around, it sounds like they lie and cheat just as much as my parents do. And it makes me wonder, how am I the only one that's like this? Like, I don't lie or cheat or steal anymore because I don't really have a reason to. And I'm not saying that it's entirely justified to, like, steal if you're, like, in my situation. And it's just, like, really weird to me that I am as nice as I am. I know that's really subjective, and I said I try to keep this subjective as possible. But I think that's pretty much an objective statement. But that's really another video entirely. Let's just skip to the reason why I'm, like, homeless right now and how I got here, I guess. I guess I can start that in this video. So somewhere between the ages of about 17 and 18, I started waking up from this docile state that, you know, my parents actually love me. They really didn't. I was just that guy that would always say yes, and then they'd treat me like shit, and I would be out doing chores that I know no other kid really has to do, like, you know, chop down a tree with, like, a rusty blunt hatchet with my bare hands, or really, like, tug an engine block across the yard. I'm like, what is the point of that? It got to the point where I started questioning, like, everything. And nobody likes a guy that asks so many questions. So when one night, a friend of mine, possibly my best friend in the entire world, or very close to it, because I do have some pretty good friends out there, but not so great that they can help me out currently, and it might be a little too late by the time they can. But she texted me one night saying, you know, not doing too great, world's not going my way. Some other things I'm not going to repeat just in case, you know, someone decides to look at her psyche. And I don't want to put her on the spot, really. But she tells me these things, and I'm like, oh shit, I got to do something, you know? So I tell my parents that I really need to go, like, tonight to a bad neighborhood. At least that's how they perceived it, as a bad neighborhood. They told a bunch of, like, fabricated stories about, like, my non-existent female cousin getting shot in the leg or something in that area. And I say non-existent because they never specified who it was, and to my knowledge, I don't have any female cousins that do anything in that area, or would ever have been in that area, because most of my cousins have left, like, they're not even within the state. So it boggles me, really, that they would even try that. So immediately I knew this was full of bullshit. Like, they've been pulling, like a North Korea over my head this entire time, and that was, like, the moment I was like, yes, this is the moment where this is all, like, I've caught you on your bullshit, I'm going. Because, honestly, at that point, I knew that friends were way more reliable and important in my life than my own blood relatives. So, I did kind of this thing where I made a dummy out of clothing and put it under my bed covers, and I had a wig that kind of looked like my hair, and put that at the mouth of the covers. And then when my parents weren't looking, I snuck out in the afternoon. And then, turned off my phone, got over there, made sure everything was fine. We all had a laugh and stuff, and everything's cool. But when I got home, I snuck into my house, and I was like, I saw my little brother, and I was like, hey, what's up? And he's like, dude, you really shouldn't be here. They're gonna kick your ass for you leaving. And I was like, well, I'm not going back to that life. I'm not gonna be a docile little sheep anymore. It's time for me to grow up on my own and self-actualize for once in my life. So what I did was I snuck past their room, went up the stairs, grabbed a backpack, and stuffed it with clothes and just left. And that's really the start of this huge-ass adventure I've been on, really. I'll continue it in another video, but for right now, I just want to say that being homeless has been a physical and spiritually humbling journey, really. I honestly think more people should go on, like, such a deprived, like, quest for happiness, I want to call it. But no one should ever have to live this way for very long. It's really hard, and if you're like me that lives in the north, the winters are really, really hard to ignore. I'm actually wearing like 4 or 5 layers of clothing right now, both top and bottom, just to stay warm. So, until the next video, which is probably going to be either today or tomorrow, that's all for now. Thank you.